Are you looking for a microwave but ain't sure which appliance suits you best? If so, you've come to the right place. We've reviewed 6 different microwaves for you, and you can now find all our results here in this video. So just stay tuned. Let's get started with our microwave comparison. We divided the whole thing into a total of 3 price categories. In the low price segment, we come across 2 fairly simple appliances from the Severin and Sharp brands. In the middle, there are 2 models from the well-known electronics manufacturers, Samsung and Toshiba. And in the higher price range, we come to the multifunctional microwaves. Here we have the appliances from Medion and Bauknecht. You can find the links to the products below the video in the description. We also linked the individual reviews for you there if you want to find out more about one of the microwaves in detail. But now let's start with our equipment and technology section. First of all, it is important to differentiate between the functions of the individual appliances in order to get an overview. In the case of microwaves, this is relatively easy, because in our experience, it is only in the higher price ranges that the appliances start to become multifunctional. If you look at the Medion, for example, you will see a grill and hot air function in addition to the classic microwave mode. The Bauknecht even has a steam cooking and crisp function. Some of these many functions can even be combined on both appliances. Ultimately, it can be said that these appliances can no longer be regarded as classic microwaves in terms of their functionality, but rather as a hybrid of various kitchen appliances. The other microwaves in our test are much more basic in that regard. They all only have a classic microwaving mode and have no extras in terms of their functionality. Admittedly, in the mid-price range, things are starting to get a little more interesting in terms of the operating options. While the cheaper appliances rely on some kind of mechanical rotary control, with one dial for setting the time and another for its power. Samsung, Toshiba, and also the higher-priced models have added a display to the controls. This does not mean that there are no more rotary controls, but they are now at least partially coupled with the display, which ultimately creates more setting options. Unfortunately, the Samsung does not use this to the same extent, which can be seen from the fact that there are no other functions apart from the defrost function and clock setting. Even the cheaper appliances have the defrost function, so you could say that we basically have a normal microwave here, just with a little more convenience. The Toshiba, on the other hand, takes advantage of this and offers all kinds of features for a mid-range appliance. In addition to the child lock and a quick start, these include the multi-stage cooking function, which allows you to run different settings in a sequence. For example, you could set the appliance to defrost for 1 minute and then cook for 3 minutes at 800 watts. The settings would then run automatically one after the other. Incidentally, the Medion comes very close to the Toshiba, at least in terms of features. Only the Bauknecht is slightly different here. Not only is it the only appliance in our test that has a touchscreen, it also has much more to offer in terms of its predefined programs. While Severin, Sharp, and Samsung are completely empty-handed here, Toshiba and Medion offer 12 and 10 presets respectively. Bauknecht, on the other hand, not only has 18 automatic recipes, but also additional presets via the special quick prep settings. If you look at the technical data, you can see a similar pattern as before, namely that the values generally improve as the price class increases. In terms of the size, only the Toshiba stands out here, which is quite small compared to its price class. All the others are in line with our expectations. Especially with the larger devices, you have to check in advance whether you can store them at home. If you look at the power, on the other hand, Medion is a little conspicuous. With up to 900 watts and 10 power levels, it almost feels as if they wanted to set themselves apart from the competition. Whether you really need that, well, judge for yourself. It is precisely these values that give the Medion a further boost, allowing it to assert itself in terms of features and technology. It also confirms its standing when it comes to its operating options and features, and with a timer duration of 95 minutes and a turning plate diameter of 30 centimeters, it even leaves the Bauknecht a step behind. Although the Bauknecht has a few more accessories, the bottom line is that it is only good enough for a strong second place, with the Toshiba taking third place, despite its somewhat smaller dimensions. And as a reminder, you can find the links to the individual reviews and to the products in the description below the video. And if the video was helpful to you, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. For my first impression, I paid a particular attention to the workmanship, especially to the gap dimensions, because this is where you really notice if something is well manufactured or not. You can clearly see, for example, that the gaps on the Severin, one of the cheaper appliances, are quite visible. There are places, like here at the top corner, where you can clearly see that there are differences. The higher the price and quality of the appliances, the better the quality of workmanship, and the better the choice of materials. This means that gaps are not really an issue, and everything fits together neatly. The next important point for me was the casing itself. We have large, flat metal surfaces here, and it's important that this metal doesn't wobble too much. That's fine on the sides, and it doesn't really matter at the bottom, but the top is always in sight. It has to be well finished there in any case. There are two different solutions here. Either you choose a thicker material, which of course makes the device heavier, but the top layer can't move as well as a result. Another possibility is that the plate is either slightly raised or recessed. This provides more stability. The device from Sharp is the one that particularly stands out here. Not only is the material quite thin, it wasn't enforced in any way as well. As a result, the metal on top wobbles up and down quite clearly. You can recognize the quality of the microwaves, especially when you touch them, and this happens most often on the doors. I noticed that the doors of the two cheaper appliances in particular are quite loose in their anchoring and can wobble back and forth or up and down a lot. The door closing and opening mechanism works well, but it's not so good that you'd say it feels particularly high quality. With the more expensive or higher quality appliances, everything fits together much better. With some appliances, the door handles are solid and it seemed very robust. That conveys the feeling of having some high quality materials here. So here too, as the price goes up, the overall value and our impression of the devices get better and better. And when handling the microwaves, especially opening and closing the doors, I noticed another point that I then consciously paid attention to, namely, how stable are these microwaves? And here I noticed that the Medion, Toshiba, and Sharp appliances, for example, do not have any rubberized feet. They therefore slide back and forth quite easily. However, this effect is only very slight with the Medion, because the appliance is so solid and heavy that its own weight means it stands fairly securely. The Bauknecht, Samsung, and Severin microwaves all have at least one, if not two rubber feet in needed places so that the appliances stand securely. So much for my first impression. Let's see what else we discovered in our practical test. So much for our first impression about these microwaves. Now let's get started with our test results. We'll go through the whole thing with you in the order in which we tested them. First, we looked at what we had to consider before preparing any food. As a rule, you should only clean the appliances once, place them on a heat-resistant surface, and of course, leave some space around them so that the heat can radiate. In some cases, it may even be that the placement instructions contain further specifications. For example, Sharp, Toshiba, and Medion recommend placing the back of the device against a wall. Secondly, we went through the operation. Basically, we can say that the complexity of operation depends very much on the range of functions of the microwave. Accordingly, the appliances in the affordable price range are very easy to use and are absolutely intuitive to operate. Anyone who has ever had a microwave at home should be familiar with the two-dial system and have no problems with it. In the mid-price range, things get a little more complicated. Not so much with the Samsung, but with the Toshiba, you have to look at the instructions from time to time to find out how to make the desired setting. This principle applies all the more to Medion and Bauknecht. The range of functions with the various operating modes and predefined programs is so extensive that you should definitely have the instructions on hand when you start cooking. This statement can only be toned down somewhat with the Bauknecht, as the manufacturer has managed to create a fairly tidy structure here, which may allow you to manage without instructions if in doubt. What one or two microwave users will certainly not like is that, as the price increases, the appliances tend to detach the switch on and switch off functionality from the door mechanism. This means that although Toshiba, Medion, and Bauknecht stop cooking when you open the door, it does not continue automatically when you close the door again. You actually have to press the on button repeatedly to resume preparation. This can actually be a bit annoying, but you should get used to it. With Samsung and Toshiba, the control for setting the microwave are also not as fine as we would like them to be. When defrosting, for example, you can only select in steps of 100 grams. Unfortunately, this only improves in the higher price range and the intervals become finer. Nevertheless, even with Medion and Bauknecht, you have to accept slight compromises in some areas. Now we come to the third and most important point, namely the preparation with the microwaves. For our test, we simply assumed that most people would use such an appliance to reheat food from the previous day. So, we made some pasta with cheese on top and saved some leftovers for the next day. We reheated it in the microwaves at maximum power for 2 to 3 minutes. And we're actually a little surprised by the results here and there, but not with the cheaper appliances. They actually performed as you would expect. The pasta was hot at the edges, but only lukewarm to warm in the middle, and even cold in some places. Anyone who has ever used a microwave might be familiar with this problem. The layer of cheese on the top makes the whole thing even more difficult, as the appliances have difficulties reheating it consistently. Now you would expect the microwaves in higher price categories to cope better with this, but that was only partially the case. Only the Samsung and Bauknecht managed to achieve a relatively even heat distribution. Toshiba and Medion, on the other hand, did no better than the cheaper appliances. We were particularly surprised by the Medion, as it had the highest maximum output in our test at 900 watts, which made us expect a little more oomph. Then we got ourselves some chicken soup. This is also something you might want to make quickly in the microwave, and while we're at it, we can also see how the microwave copes with liquids. So we run it again at full power for 2 to 3 minutes. Interestingly, the results here are much closer to the price than with the pasta. On the whole, it can be said that the heat distribution has improved with the increasing price. We would only give the Bauknecht an average rating here. Basically, however, it was fine here too. Many people also like to use microwaves for defrosting, so we tried this out for you as well. To do this, we ran 250 grams of frozen minced meat through the microwave according to the specifications of the individual appliances. The results were again somewhat surprising for us. In our opinion, one of the cheaper appliances, the Sharp, did the best job. The meat was defrosted almost completely except for a small icy spot in the middle, and without producing any brown spots by accidentally cooking it. We also had good results with the Samsung and the Medion. The Toshiba and, surprisingly, the Bauknecht came last in our test. In both cases, the meat remained frozen at the core and was already starting to turn brown at the corners. We would have expected more from the Bauknecht in particular. The bottom line is that we had different cooking results when it came to the microwave operation. However, this is not the end of the story. As mentioned at the beginning, the Medion and Bauknecht not only have a microwave function, but also have other operating modes that need to be evaluated. The first thing that interested us in this regard is an all-time classic, the good old frozen pizza. Normally, of course, it belongs in the oven. In this case, however, both microwaves offer a corresponding auto program with fitting presets. With the Medion, a mixture of the microwave and grill functionality prepares the pizza. The same applies to the Bauknecht, except that there is a crisp function on top. At this point, we are already skeptical as to whether this will work or not. When we see that the pizza is supposed to be ready in 12 minutes with the Medion and in 6 to 7 minutes with the Bauknecht, we lose all hope. Impossible, right? That fast without any preheating? But, well, let's give it a try. And what were the results? Both appliances produced a really good pizza. The Bauknecht's crisp function made the crust of the pizza a little better, but overall you can say for both appliances that the crust was crispy and the pie itself was chewy gooey but not soggy. In the end, you can be more than satisfied with the pizza result. In the final stages, we tried out all the other functions of the two microwaves. So we heated drinks, made fries, fried bacon, grilled sausages, and prepared all the nice things that you wouldn't actually do in the microwave. Interestingly, the results were good across the board with both appliances. Admittedly, you sometimes have to play with the settings a bit and try things out. The default setting for fries on the Bauknecht, for example, went a little overboard. If you are a little more careful here, the fries will be just as they should be. Crispy on the outside and fluffy and potatoey on the inside. The bacon, on the other hand, was just as it should be in both appliances right from the start, firm to the bite and crispy, as you would expect from a decent diner. And as far as the sausages are concerned, you can even create a taste that is actually reminiscent of grilling them. Although only the Bauknecht can steam cook, this also worked very well in our test. Our vegetable mix turned out better than in the cooking pot, meaning firm to the bite and having that crunch or snap, but still cooked through. As you can already see, we really enjoyed the different operating modes of the Medion and Bauknecht. At the end of the day, of course, this is also reflected in the rating, meaning that these two appliances came out on top in our practical test. The Bauknecht is one little step ahead, with a tidier operating structure and better thought out and higher quality accessories. A positive mention should also be made of the Samsung microwave, which may not be able to offer a grill or hot air function and the like, but has delivered a consistently good performance in its microwave mode. You can find the links to the individual reviews and to the products in the description below the video. And if the video was helpful to you, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. When handling the microwaves, we naturally paid a little attention to whether there were any other anomalies. The first point here is the view into the cooking chamber. After all, you want to be able to check the cooking status of your food through the glass from time to time. The Severin and Bauknecht offer a relatively good view, while the other appliances are not quite as easy to see into. The Samsung, in particular, shows how it shouldn't be done. The glass is so reflective that you can see practically nothing apart from the interior lighting. The volume of the microwaves, on the other hand, is generally within reasonable dimensions. Around 60 decibels is the average here. The Sharp stands out on the negative side with 78 to 80 decibels and a somewhat unpleasant rumbling noise. The Samsung achieves good values with 55 to 58 decibels, which is even below the 60 decibels mentioned. In contrast, the Severin comes out on top in terms of power consumption, which certainly has to do with the low maximum power output. However, we also found the Sharp and Samsung to be reasonably well in terms of their performance. In terms of heat development, the microwaves are very similar on the whole. The top right-hand side of the appliance gets very hot on all of them, so much so that you can't put your hand there for long. The rest of the appliance is slightly different, especially with the Medion and Bauknecht. We felt that the heat was distributed a little more over these appliances, which may be due to the fact that there are more functions available, and the technology has to find its place somewhere. Otherwise, however, we were ultimately satisfied with the appliances in terms of their heat management. There was no real outlier from our point of view. Nevertheless, the microwaves should of course be allowed to cool down before cleaning to avoid any risk. It is also better to unplug the appliance, as the interior of all appliances should be cleaned by hand with a damp cloth. Don't be fooled by Bauknecht's auto-clean function either. This basically involves running a container of water through the microwave at certain settings in preparation for cleaning. Afterwards, however, you still have to grab a cloth and clean by hand. So it's not really an auto-clean. However, it can still make sense to freshen up the microwave. After all, at least some of the accessories on some appliances can go in the dishwasher. This is a big advantage when it comes to minimizing the time spent on cleaning. These appliances include the Sharp, the Medion, and the Bauknecht. The bottom line is that we have to distribute our points between the individual microwaves evenly when it comes to cleaning and handling, since all are very close to each other. Although the Bauknecht stands out slightly, it is not too ahead of the other appliances. The microwaves in our comparison were thoroughly scrutinized and basically performed well within their respective price ranges. The Toshiba appliance was somewhat out of line, as despite its numerous features and operating options, it still didn't entirely convince us, especially in our practical test. In first place, and thus the winner of our comparison, is the Bauknecht Chef Plus MW49SL, which showed some weaknesses when defrosting, but otherwise achieved good results in almost all categories. Close behind in second place is the Medion MD 15501, which is slightly less well equipped than the Bauknecht, but was also able to show its strengths as a multifunctional microwave. Third place went to the Samsung MWF 300G, a relatively simple microwave without a lot of goodies, but which achieved quite consistent cooking results, and also offers a fairly large interior. So we reviewed these microwaves for you. If there is a device that particularly interests you, then take a look at the video description below. We linked all the devices there, of course, including our individual reviews. Otherwise, stay tuned. Our end card will provide a few more interesting video suggestions for you to check out.
Denn im Anschluss folgt die Endcard mit ein paar interessanten Videovorschlägen.